Hey everyone, it's Miss Gibson, and today I have got a really awesome book ready for you. I'm already prepared, I have my crown on because today I'm going to be king of the wild things. So obviously, we are going to read Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak, and I hope you like it. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another, his mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew and grew and grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day, and in and out of weeks, and almost over a year, to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws. Till Max said, "Be still!" and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once, and they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all, and made him king of all the wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." "Now stop," Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then all around, from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said, "No." The wild things roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye, and sailed back over a year, and in and out of weeks, and through a day, and into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot. Now that we've read Where the Wild Things Are, we're going to create our very own wild thing. So for this activity, you're going to need blank paper and a pencil, and then you'll also need either markers or crayons. I can't wait to see it. Okay guys, so since we just read Where the Wild Things Are, we are going to draw our very own wild thing. Specifically, we're going to draw this wild thing with his stripy upper half and scaly lower half and his hairy face. So let's get started. For this wild thing, your paper needs to be in portrait orientation with the shorter sides at the top and the bottom and the longer sides on the right and left. To start off with, we're going to draw his head. It's kind of a short fat circle in the upper middle part of your paper. So it's almost like an oval. Then we are going to draw two curved lines for his body. Next, we're going to work on his arms. He's swinging from a tree branch, so we're going to make them be very close to his head. So just two more curved lines, starting by his head and then coming down on this body section. So next, we are going to work on his face. He's going to need some horns around the top of his head, you're going to draw 2 curved triangles, just like that. Then we're going to start with his nose. It's big and wide and in the center of his face. So we're going to do a half circle, and we're just going to come in with a little curl on each end, and then you're just going to connect those in the middle. He's got those big, round, yellow eyes. So we're going to give him some big, round eyes. Don't forget his pupils. He's kind of looking to the side. Then we're going to give him some little wrinkle lines because, you know, he's a monster. And then his smile that goes all the way across his face. And he's got some pointy teeth that are just triangles. And if you remember our picture, they're not actually touching, so just separate little triangles. After that, he's got that hair and beard around his face, so we'll start between his horns and just give him hair that stands up. Then we're going to do the same thing at the bottom because he kind of had some bangs and went down to about his eyes. And then we're just going to continue those lines all the way around his face. And don't worry about your pencil lines being too dark because they were black. We're going to do those lines all the way until we get almost to where his chin would be. I'm going to color these in nice and dark when we get started with coloring. Now when you get to where his chin is, the lines are a little longer because he has kind of a little beard. So I'm going to make sure those lines are even longer. Okay, so next we'll work on his hands. Now he's going to be swinging from a tree branch, so I'm just going to start on the edge of my paper. And I'm going to draw a straight line that's going to go right around where I did the end of his hands. And I'm going to do the same thing right across. We have a straight across tree branch. Now I'm just going to continue the lines I had for his arms. I'm going to make it look like his hands are wrapped around the tree branch. So we're just going to draw some claws on the top part of the branch. And these are just going to be triangles. You can draw 3 or 4, whatever you have space for. So he's got his claws reaching around the edge of the tree branch. Okay, now we're going to do his legs. These are a little more difficult than the rest of him. So we're going to draw, like the bottom of his body is going to go about here. I might have to adjust that in a minute. But his legs are kind of up in the air. So I'm going to go from here to draw like his knee. We're just going to come around and give him a foot. If it goes off the edge of your page, that's fine. And then just the rest of his leg. Okay, so we may need to adjust this. And we're going to do about the same thing on this side. I'm going to give him his knee that's up in the air. And then we're going to draw his foot. And it's just going to come right back around to the inside. We're going to give him some claws on his feet. Again, just some pointy triangle claws. If they go off your page, that's fine. Well, after that, he's got those stripes on the top half of his body. So we're going to make them a little curved. You can draw straight through his beard if you want, and the same with his arms. And then for his scales, these are actually really easy. You're just going to draw some U shapes. So just all over his legs and the bottom part of his body, we're just going to draw some little U shapes to be his scales. I think that's the coolest thing about these monsters is they look like they are made out of lots of different monsters put together. This one has fur and scales, and in a minute we're going to give him a tail after we finish his scales. And right at the bottom, you are going to just start and make a nice swirl shape. If it goes off the bottom of your paper like mine is, that's fine. And then draw a second half. And to make it look like hair, like in our book, you're just going to add some little lines. If yours fits on your paper, great. Mine just doesn't. And there we have our monster Wild Thing outline. Now for the fun part, we get to color him, and our Wild Thing has a ton of colors. I'm going to start with his yellow eyes because that's one thing that they mention in the book more than once, that the Wild Things have yellow eyes. So I'm going to start with that. I'm using crayons. You can use markers, crayons, colored pencils, whatever you have handy. This is just what I'm using. And I am going to make my Wild Thing look like our Wild Thing from the book. However, you, as always, can use whatever colors you want on your own Wild Thing. You can make it your own. You can make it look as terrible and mean and scary and wild as you want it to be. So, I've got my yellow eyes. I think I'll do a little bit more on his face. I know he had a pink nose, pinkish. Close enough to what I have. You're going to see exactly how close I can make my Wild Thing look to the book Wild Thing. We'll compare them at the end. And as always, I'll show you a few different examples. Next, I think his face was like that peachy apricot color. So that is how I'm going to get started on his face. I'm going to make sure I don't get my peach in with his eyes or his teeth, but I'm going to start from there. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is color the upper half of our Wild Thing's body. So here's one thing I've noticed, that a lot of people think they like this Wild Thing because he's wearing a striped shirt. Well, if you actually look at the pictures in our book, it's not a shirt. It is just the upper half of his body. It just happens to be striped. And the reason we know that is because, well, first, you can never really see his shirt tail. It looks like it just blends into the rest of him. But second, the backs of his hands and his fingers are also striped. And the stripes are kind of an orange and a yellow. So that is what I'm going to use for the stripes on the body and arms of my Wild Thing. But again, you can make your stripes whatever color you would like to see them be. Get creative. You don't have to stick by the book. I'm just doing it. And the rest of his stripes, like we said before, are yellow. So I'm going to color the next part yellow. I've got a slightly darker yellow than I used for his eyes, but they could definitely be the same. And then we will be finished with the top half of our Wild Thing. So our top half is finished. Now we are going to do the bottom half of our Wild Thing. And his legs, to me, in the book look like they're kind of a really light gray. So that's what I'm going to do for his legs. I'm just going to lightly color them in with a gray. And since I did everything else in black, I'm just coloring over mine. But if you cover up your scales, you can always go back and put them in with your black crayon. So we've got a furry upper half of our Wild Thing, and now we are working on a scaly gray lower half. Guys, we are almost finished with our Wild Thing. Remember, he's swinging from a tree branch, so I'm going to take my brown and just be careful not to get it over his claws, but I'm going to color in the tree branch that he's holding on to. And if you want to add some leaves or some vines or other branches to your tree branch, go ahead. I'm just doing a really basic version, so it looks like our wild thing is holding on to something. But remember, make this your own. You can make it super fancy if you want to. Okay, look, our actual wild thing is completely finished. The last thing I'm going to show you is totally optional, but the book is taking place kind of towards nighttime, and you know I don't like to leave a lot of white on my paper, so I am just going to take my blue crayon and color in all of the outside spaces. I'm using cerulean, but you can use any shade of blue you want, and I am just going to make it look like the sky is behind our wild thing. So remember, if you did some extra leaves or branches or made him look like he's in a jungly area, you've already got some of your background filled in. But I'm just going to take my blue and very lightly color in all of these outside areas. And there it is, our completely finished wild thing. This was one of my most favorite things that we've done. It was so much fun. And I can't wait to see yours. Remember to send it to me on Google Classroom or bring it to our next Google Meet. Can't wait to see them. I hope you enjoyed Where the Wild Things Are. Now don't be afraid to put on your wolf suit and go start your own wild rumpus.